The Not So Perfect Pair by starcollectorsilas. Before we begin, heavy trigger warnings will be provided in the description as well as the first comment. Please check them out for any potential triggers. Viewer discretion is advised. Chapter 18. Chuya groaned and sighed, stretching his arms as he walked across the grass to his lunch spot, following Dazai, who was a few steps ahead of him, kicking a rock. He ran a second to catch up, reaching Dazai's side as Atsushi greeted them with a smile, him and Akutagawa the only others there. "Hey guys," Dazai said with a yawn, sitting down. Chuya joined him, not wasting any time before pulling out his lunchbox and handing half a sandwich to Dazai. "You seem exhausted," Atsushi commented jokingly, sitting with his own food. Dazai sighed dramatically, crossing his arms and speaking with a mouthful of Chuya's sandwich. "I am. I got woken up at 4 a.m. because certain breeds of dogs don't bark and actually snore loudly," he said dryly, pointedly glancing at Chuya. Chuya scowled, cheeks slightly pink. "He could have hung up," he pointed out, glaring at Dazai. Yeah, whatever," Dazai responded, waving him away dismissively. "I do what I want." Chuya rolled his eyes, choosing to focus on his lunch and not Dazai's stupidity. It was funny. Even after fully admitting he likes Dazai, nothing much had changed. He's still annoyed at him, insulting him, and just secretly admiring him. Speaking of, Dazai was wearing his glasses today, the black frames complementing his dark hair and pale skin. Why did he always look so pretty? As Chuya stared, Rampo, Yosono, and Kunikida came over, Rampo talking to them both animatedly. With that, Chuya snapped out of his temporary stupor, instead blurting out the first thing that came to his mind. "So, Dazai, your birthday's on Monday." Dazai grimaced and sighed dramatically. "Indeed it is," regretfully. "You know, Forever 15 is a nice line for a gravestone. It's a bit unoriginal though. I'd prefer Never 16. He said in a contemplative tone, instantly getting 6 glares trained on him. "Don't joke like that," Kunikida said, a hint of worry in his tone, masked by annoyance. Dazai stuck his tongue out, pushing the sandwich half he had barely eaten into Chuya's hands. "Not hungry?" Chuya asked, frowning. Dazai shrugged, playing with the string of the hoodie he was wearing. "Not anymore." Chuya paused, looking at the sandwich, then quickly turned back to his lunchbox and pulled out a cereal bar, looking at Dazai with a hint of smugness. "You said you'd eat cereal bars if I had them, if you weren't very hungry. Well, now I have one," he said proudly. Dazai blinked in surprise. "When did I say that?" he asked skeptically, not moving to take the offered food. "Ages ago. I can't remember when exactly. It was during prelims, I think." Chuya answered, throwing it at Dazai's chest, watching him pick it up and examine the back. "Please eat that, at least," he added, slightly more apologetically. He knew sometimes Dazai just wasn't hungry, but there had been one too many lunches with barely anything eaten for his liking recently. Dazai smiled and elbowed Chuya, ripping open the packet. "I suppose, since my dog will keep whining if I don't. He's being dramatic. One lunch skipped is no big deal." Dazai must have been blind if he missed the multiple looks of concern being worn by his various friends. Dazai must have also been stupid if he thought anyone believed that this was the first time he had skipped lunch, or that lunch was the only meal he'd skipped. It was like Dazai had taken a sharp decline recently, or like he'd gotten worse at hiding it, starting with the meltdown last week, and now noticeably not eating. What happened? Who happened? As Dazai slowly picked at the bar, Chuya tilted his head. "Dazai?" he said, grabbing his attention. Then he grabbed Dazai's wrist, lifting his hand up. His fingers closed around his wrist, and Chuya was careful to angle his hand to allow for the older view of the rest of their friends to see. Then he twisted his hand, smiling and pressing their palms together, carefully inspecting the size difference. "My hands are still bigger than yours," he remarked, his face slightly warm. Dazai had stopped, sitting still, his mouth slightly open and his face red. "Your fingers are longer than mine, though," Chuya continued, shifting so their fingers lined up. And indeed, while Chuya's were thicker, Dazai's were thin and long. Chuya already knew this, but he wasn't passing up the opportunity to sit and compare hand sizes with his not quite newfound crush, even if the original motivator was grim. "You'd think that yours would be bigger because..." Chuya died internally for a second. "You're taller than me, but no, I think you'd play an instrument, like violin or piano, very well." Chuya felt like he might throw up, his face red and his stomach turning, butterflies having a nervous breakdown in his intestines. What was he saying? Why was he saying this? He'd never say this. What was wrong with him? Dazai just looked like he had stopped working, breath stolen and face red, unable to process anything that was going on, other than a simple, "Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit." They were both still for a second, until Chuya had enough, slapping Dazai's hand away and crossing his arms, wishing he could sink into the ground. "Chuya's giving me mixed signals. If he's in love with me, he should just say that," Dazai said after a second, voice mostly normal, aside from a slight tremor. Chuya's face flared red, and he huffed, rolling his eyes. "Of course I'm not. Why would I be in love with a mackerel bastard like you?" he said, lying through his teeth. "Aw, Chuya's so mean," Dazai whined, throwing an arm around Chuya's shoulders and leaning against him, speaking next to his ear. "I wouldn't even make fun of him. You clearly love me if you're so intent on forcing me to do silly things like eat cereal bars and go to school." Chuya groaned, making a show of attempting to push Dazai off of him, not really trying. He could easily get Dazai off of him if he wanted to, and the not fully there weight of Dazai's body told him Dazai was aware of this as well. "Get off me, prick! I don't need to be in love with you to want you to be alive tomorrow," he refuted, scowling, his cheeks pink. Dazai pushed Chuya slightly, and Chuya looked to glare at him, his breath catching and eyes widening as he realized that their faces were centimeters apart. "Come on, Chuya, admit it. You love me. You want to marry me and be my dog for life." Chuya swallowed thickly, the only thing holding him up being his own arm from how far back he was leaning. "I do not want to be your dog for life." "You didn't say you don't want to marry me, though," Dazai pointed out, that stupid grin on his face, that stupid look in his eyes like he knew exactly what he was doing, that stupid look that proved he was anything but stupid. "You want to kiss me so bad right now," Dazai teased with a smile, cheeks flushed and hair falling in his face, his glasses slipped slightly down his nose. God, Chuya wanted to kiss him. "And what if I did?" Chuya snapped back, His eyes narrowed with flustered irritation. Dazai's eyes opened wide, like he wasn't expecting that response. His mouth falling open, his eyes dropping to Chuya's lips in a way that made Chuya's stomach twist in apprehension. "I thought I'd stop you," Dazai responded, trying desperately and still failing to sound teasing. Chuya hesitated and then took a sharp breath, struggling to get his response out in any kind of coherent manner. "Your soulmate might want to stop me. They'd probably have a problem with it." Chuya instantly cursed himself internally. Of all things he could have said. Dazai backed up quickly, clearing his throat. "Yeah, Chuya's such a slimy slug anyway. Kissing him would be horrible," he said, looking away. "My soulmate might have a problem with me kissing you as well," Chuya added shortly. Dazai hummed absently. Maybe." They fell into an awkward silence, both well aware of the slight distance between their bodies, the pointed lack of contact in contrast with their usual near full-body touch. Chuya picked at his trousers, playing with the seams, the quiet between him and Dazai suffocating. His eyes fell to the bandages Dazai was playing with, and the realization struck him, making him pause. "How are you going to see your soulmate, Mark, if you're wearing bandages all the time anyway?" Chuya asked, curiosity overwhelming his embarrassment. Dazai tensed up and froze, staring at the bit of bandage at his wrist he had been messing around with. "Would you just take them off, or would you check before going to bed?" Chuya pressed, tilting his head. Dazai cleared his throat and then shrugged awkwardly. "I haven't thought about it. I guess I'll figure it out when it happens." Dazai responded emptily. "Oh," Chuya said, a little disappointed. Honestly, he had hoped Dazai would take the bandages off for a little while after his birthday. After all, they weren't really there for a specific reason, other than his skin sensitivity. If Chuya was in his shoes, he'd probably want to be able to see the second that his soulmate Mark appeared. Dazai stood up suddenly and grabbed his bag. "I don't feel great. I'm gonna go to the nurse's office and see if I can get sent home," he said quickly. Chuya blinked up at him and then went to pack his lunch away. "I'll come with you," he offered, but he was shot down quickly. "No, thanks. I'll be fine. Just stay here," Dazai said, and before Chuya could object, Dazai was hurrying away. Chuya watched him leave with furrowed eyebrows and a look of concern, seeing him disappear into the doors of the school without looking back. Then he turned back to his friends, the older of which Yosano, Kunikida, and Rampo moved closer like they knew what was coming. "Did you see that?" Chuya asked, a hint of disbelief in his tone. "My hand went right through his wrist, no problem." This issue clearly isn't a new one. Were we blind, or was he just good at hiding it? You don't get to that point after skipping lunch a few times a week, Kunikida said, frowning deeply. "He doesn't eat breakfast either," Rampo added. "Does that mean that the only meal he eats consistently is dinner?" Yosono asked in disbelief. "Which he probably only does at my house," Chuya responded, sighing and running a hand through his hair. They went quiet for a few moments, thinking. "How do we fix it?" Kunikida asked quietly. "I don't think we can," Chuya said with a sigh. "There's clearly something bigger going on, but currently, Dazai is skin and bones, and we don't know whether he's actively deciding to starve himself or whether it's just happening thanks to some kind of aversion or something like that." Yosano nodded slowly and hummed. "We just need to try and encourage him, I suppose. Carry around snacks or something," Rampo suggested. Chuya nodded, wincing slightly as a slight, burning sensation started on his arm, but he ignored it. Yeah, like the cereal bar. He ate that, albeit hesitantly, Chuya said, glancing at his lunchbox, most of the contents untouched. I normally have something for him to eat. It makes sense if the rest of you start carrying something simple too. Just offer him something if you notice he hasn't been eating for a while. He sighed, biting his nail anxiously. I don't want him to get sick just because he can't eat for some reason, he added quietly. Kunikida sighed, pushing his glasses up his nose bridge. None of us do, but you, of all people, know Dazai won't take help easily. He certainly won't ask for it. This is probably the best we can do. Chuya nodded, going to rub his arm, grimacing at the burning feeling but not looking, more distracted by looking in the direction of where Dazai had left. Yosano took his arm sharply a second later, and Chuya yelped, and then looked, watching a few of the fading lines suddenly change shades, going to a deeper blue, like the wounds were being torn open again. There was a collective intake of breath. Suddenly, Rampo was on his feet, face pale. He was already pulling out his phone, and he grabbed his bag as he ran in the direction of the school, tripping and almost falling in his haste. Just as Rampo disappeared and Chuya was about to start asking questions, the school bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. And there was no more time to ask questions. Chuya sat at the table, picking at the pasta in front of him half-heartedly. He had long given up on the sleeves. The only person who hadn't been told was Kyoka, and she was at her friend's house. It was quiet at the table. His parents already finished eating and sitting in the living room, and Koyo had her headphones on, watching something she needed for her course apparently. The pasta was really good, but he just wasn't hungry, pushing it about on his plate, not really thinking about anything, yet somehow managing to be overwhelmed with thought at the same time. He felt slightly sick, just tired and worried about Dazai. He hadn't heard from him since he went home, despite messaging him multiple times. His gut was telling him that there was something wrong. He wasn't sure how, he just knew something bad was going to happen. He had a sense of impending dread, he supposed. He sighed and shifted, leaning against the back of his chair and dropping his cutlery, staring up at the ceiling for a few minutes, breathing slowly and carefully. Then there was a sudden sharp pain in the side of his neck. Unable to help himself, he screamed, curling in on himself instinctively, holding his hand over the side of his neck where it hurt. Koyo jumped, looking up, and Chuya just whined, closing his eyes tightly as the pain didn't stop, different to anything he'd experienced before. Quickly, Koyo was at his side, worry painted across her features as she held onto Chuya's wrist, the other hand on the side of his face. What's wrong? She borderline screamed, panicked, eyes wide and fearful as Chuya shied away from the touch, wincing and biting into his lip in an attempt to distract from the pain. Chuya's parents were the next over, and Koyo stepped away to let them in, watching in horror as Chuya's parents tried to speak to him. Hey, what's wrong? What's wrong? He wasn't sure which of his parents asked. He just fell into the open arms of his mother, hands still tightly closed over his neck, chest heaving and eyes closed tightly as he tried to figure out what was going on. My neck, it hurts. I don't know. He managed to get out after a few tries, breathing quickly and heavily. Let me see it, his mother said, attempting to be soothing, but her own panic clear in her tone. Chuya didn't want to, but he pulled his hand off his neck, instead holding on to his mother's t-shirt, his eyes slightly closed as he heard the gasp his sister let out. "Julia, don't panic. There's nothing wrong with you. It hurts, but you're okay," his father said, his hand landing on his back. "Julia, where is your soulmate? Do you know?" his mother asked, voice quiet and fearful. Julia felt the dread pull in his stomach. "No, I don't," he muttered, pulling away, and he scrambled to his feet, running to the bathroom as the pain began to fade. His parents were close behind, and he could see their pale and worried expressions behind him in the mirror. But that wasn't what he focused on. Instead, he was focused on the wide blue lines across the left side of his neck, deep and reaching to the front of his throat. Instantly, he felt the nausea creeping upon him, making his eyes water and the back of his throat burn. His eyes stayed glued to the blue lines until he couldn't focus them anymore, and instead he turned to the toilet, dropping to his knees quickly and leaning over it as he gagged, throat burning as he threw up, eyes watering and hands gripping onto his trousers like his life depended on it. His mother came in and pulled his hair out of the way, rubbing his back, and Julia didn't even notice, but he was crying, having a full-blown panic attack as he sat shaking, crying and throwing up in the bathroom floor. "Is he dead? Is he dead? That's what this is, right? He's trying to kill himself again?" Julia asked pleadingly when he stopped gagging, wiping his mouth with his sleeve, knowing he'd regretted the second he was thinking clearly, but he didn't care right now. "I don't know, honey. I don't know. I'm sorry," his mother said, her voice breaking as she pulled him into a hug, holding him tightly like he might shatter. "I don't want him to be dead. He can't be dead. He can't." Julia gasped out, voice hoarse and scratchy, tears soaking his cheeks. "He's not dead. I don't think he's dead," Koyo says quietly from the doorway, coming further into the room and sitting in the floor next to him. Making a split-second decision, Julia moved from his mother's arms to Koyo's, and she held him even tighter than his mother had, unafraid of hurting him. "A man in my class, his soulmate died a week ago from cancer. For as long as I knew him, he always had marks on his arms from my soulmate having his blood drawn. I haven't seen any of those marks since his soulmate died. If he was dead, I think they would fade," Koyo explained shakily, somehow the calmest in the room. "But how long does it take to fade? He could be dead and it's just not fading yet," Julia countered, and Koyo shook her head. "I don't know." Julia cried harder, and she took a deep breath. "Listen, we can go put on a movie and just see. If they fade, then we'll know. Otherwise, we can assume he's alive," Koyo reasoned. Julia paused. Then he nodded. With a shaky voice, he said one last sentence. "Please, let him be alive." Dazai had put Elise to bed early. She wasn't happy about it, but Mori got in from work just as Dazai had been patting down her bed for her, so she hadn't complained and just did as she was told. But it must have been quiet for hours now. Well, maybe not. Half an hour probably. But still, she was cold and wanted the bathroom. Quietly, she moved out from under her covers, her baby pink princess nightdress falling around her knees as she softly opened the door. She walked across the hall to the bathroom, wrinkling her nose at the sudden smell that hit her. Like iron, and something unpleasant and tangy. She stuck her tongue out and shook her head in exaggerated disgust before she heard the sound from her father's room, and she froze, staying still for a few seconds until she was confident it was safe. Maybe she wouldn't flush the toilet when she was done just to be safe. She didn't want the noise. Then Dazai would get blamed though. But Dazai got in trouble a lot anyway, and he always handled the hits a lot better than she did. He would tell her to blame it on him, maybe. Shaking her head and getting back to her original mission, she approached the bathroom again, the smell getting stronger and overwhelming, making her feel a little sick. The door didn't have a lock anymore, but it was late and quiet. She was confident there wouldn't be anybody in. She pushed open the door and got hit by a wave of sharp iron smell, her eyes widening as she caught sight of the scene before her, the cause apparent. Oh right, blood smells like iron. As she processed the sight before her, Dazai in a bathtub with a shiny silver scalpel in his hand and blood down his front, still weakly pulsing from his neck. She was silent, hand holding tightly onto the door handle. Then she took a deep breath and screamed. Remember when I said it only gets heavier from here? Yep. The next chapter, chapter 19, will be marked explicit just to be safe. I'm not sure how that will affect the video's visibility across the feed, but I'm not risking putting majorly triggering themes up for blast. I hope you all understand. And thank you for listening, everyone. Don't forget to send kudos to the author through the link in the description. Also, if you'd like to request any fix, YouTube community tabs are now open for you to post, aside from Tumblr. And if you'd like to show more support or check out the monthly schedule, click the link through Ko-fi. Hope you have a great week. Till next time.